Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursalin amma ba'd. So we are really honored here to organize an event on the human rights, okay, in the context of human rights and the celebration of human rights. So the intention and the sole purpose of this discussion is to give a kind of like look at the idea of human rights from an Islamic perspective one side, and also discuss different aspects related to human rights, especially the current trends. And we should, this is a high time for us to think about a pragmatic solution, because we are facing a lot of issues and challenges now. So just to give a background, first of all, I mean, there is always a kind of myth or fallacy which exists that the idea of human rights always start from Western world. And the discussion around human right also often it gets started from the Western world. Over the fact that the matter of the truth is Islamic world contributed quite significantly as far as human rights are concerned. Okay, I mean, often we start the discussion of human rights with French Revolution, and such movements happened in the Western world. Well before that, Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, through his Arafah message and his farewell speech, has clearly, identified and recognized the basic human rights and emphasized on the basic human rights. I mean, followed by that, we can see, especially in the Western world, I mean, even any direction or action happened as far as human rights are concerned, they were all the results of a lot of protests and revolution. They were all the products of a lot of, external pressure. Okay, when masses came out in the street, then only rulers took, forth and formed such a decision. However, when we're looking from an Islamic perspective, it is clear and evident that there is no such pressure. Without any such pressure, we have gated the world to the idea of human rights and universal brotherhood. Secondly, one point I would like to emphasize is there is always an exclusivist nature when it comes to the idea of human rights in the Western world. Even when we always celebrate the idea of Magna Carta, but even in Magna Carta, the problem is it was celebrating, it was emphasizing and acknowledging the rights of the most privileged ones, especially the landlords and especially the landlords and theological powers. However, when we're looking at the Islamic world, definitely our idea of human right is for everyone, regardless of their creed or color. Okay, I mean, this is a universal way of looking at humanity and human rights, unmindful of the color of the skin or the religion or other background. Okay, I mean, it is quite true that even today times, the exclusivist nature of the discourses of human rights still exist. When the discussion on human rights comes, we celebrate the human rights of some sections of the society. However, we are quite we have a casual approach when it comes to the human rights of others, whether it is like black, black skin, Muslims, or many other minorities. There is a casual approach people do have when it comes to human rights. Okay, I mean, here the problem is, here the pragmatic solution is definitely Islam can get and help a lot to form a pragmatic framework as far as the discourse on human right is concerned. Islam can guide us quite a lot. Okay, I think even well before the Universal Human Rights Declaration came, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's Arafah message has quite a lot to inspire the world, and the world has quite a lot to learn from that as well. One more thing is, definitely there are like many theoretical examples, celebrations when it comes to human rights, but all of them were failing when it comes to any kind of like materialistic output is concerned. They were all miserably failing. Our Islam's model is one of that of which brings a black Negro like Bilal radiallahu anhu, and the most important personalities of the society at that point of time into one platform. Okay, this is a message, and this is a pragmatic message and pragmatic strategy from which the world can learn quite a lot. I'm just like coming to the conclusion as we have the honorable guests here, especially in the context of India we are speaking. Definitely, there is a careless and casual approach when it comes to the human rights of many sections are concerned, especially the minorities, those who are from poor financial background. They are always at the Adivasis, tribals. They are always at the receiving end of violence from the many sections. Okay, those who are supposed to speak for them, they're always standing with the perpetrators. They are always standing with the perpetrators and attackers. This is a sad truth. Okay, when I mean here in this context, definitely now we have to think quite a lot about bringing human rights in a practical way, and there should be solutions which methodologies we should think this is a high time to do so. Definitely, as an organization, SSF did quite a lot in this regard. When measures for systematic exclusion started, whether it is citizenship amendment bill, or whether it is the Asifa's case in Kashmir, always SSF has thought about practical action within the framework of India's constitution and India's rights. Okay. So I think this is the method, this is the example which SSF sets, and definitely there are many others who can really learn and get inspired from this. Okay, by putting this background, I'm very much honored to have our honorable guests here. Firstly, we have to inaugurate this function, we have Professor Dr. Mohibul Haq Saab. He's a great academician. He put a great contribution in the academic field. He most importantly contributed in the field of political science. He's a respected professor at Aligarh Muslim University. We are really honored to have your presence, sir. Thank you very much for agreeing to join our event. We are also having the Honorable General Secretary of Sunni Student Federation, Muhammad Farooq Naimi Al Bukhari Sahab. He's a renowned academician. He's one of the few people who got expertise both in Islamic education and the modern secular education, who is a doctorate from Kerala University. So we are really honored to have Farooq Naimi Sahab also. He will also share his thoughts in this event. We are also having Professor Dr. Shamsuddin. Is a doctorate holder in the field of law, and is also an academic working in a renowned university. Okay, we also invite you, sir. And we are also honored to have many of our other guests. Thank you all for joining with us. So Mohibul Haq Saab will give us, his thoughts. He will share his thoughts with us. Along with that, you can also put your points and concerns in the chat box. Okay. Further, Mohibul Haq Saab will be addressing some of such concerns. First of all, we are really honored to have you, sir, and I invite you, sir, to inaugurate this function. Thank you, sir, for joining this. Okay, welcome, sir. Please kindly inaugurate this function. Mohibul Haq, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed Junaid Saab, Bukhari Saab, and the esteemed organizers of this particular event. How much time I have got to speak? Can you please, Ahmed Junaid Saab?
30 minutes, sir.
Huh?
30 minutes.
Okay, okay. Please, when 5 minutes are left or 2-3 minutes are left,
yeah,
please
you can take 30.
Okay, am I audible?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Yeah, perfectly audible, sir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Friends, I'm very happy that you have organized this particular event today. I have seen that there is a gap between what we call the secular orientation and the religious orientation today. And because of that, what happens that gap is basically widening day by day. So this kind of organization, the SSF, should become a bridge to bring both the approaches together. And I think this is a very good beginning from this particular event. It is rightly, observed most of the time that people say that Human Rights Day should not be celebrated, rather observed. Language is very important in the social sciences, you see, and why the people say that there is nothing to celebrate. So we can observe International Human Rights Day because there are colossal, flagrant violation of human rights across the globe. So that is why it is not good to celebrate. Rather, it is better to say that we are observing. I disagree with those people who say that there is nothing to celebrate, because at least with the declaration, this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted on 10 December 1948, one thing has been established, and that is called universalization of the concept of human rights. If you go through the preamble of the UDHR and then the 30 articles as it has, you'll find almost all kinds of rights of individuals. I will emphasize individuals. All the rights of individuals, they have been included. For example, social rights, political rights, economic rights, cultural rights, civil rights. All these dimensions of rights you will find in this particular document. When you are going through the preamble, you also find the echo of the sermon of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the last sermon. That khutbah, the echo you will find, where equality and non-discrimination is emphasized. But what you have to see, that it doesn't mean that we should not be critical what is happening at the international level or what is happening at the national level. It is rightly said that a democracy, you cannot function well if the citizens are not vigilant, if they are not questioning the authorities, if they are not claiming and reclaiming their spaces and their rights. The framers of the Constitution of India, they have done one thing. They have provided you fundamental rights under article, from 14 to 32. These fundamental rights are very, very important. But, these rights will be diluted. These rights will become ineffective. These rights will, lose their importance, significance if we are not claiming, reclaiming, and exercising them. For example, you have a constitutional paradigm of freedom of expression. But if you're not expressing your opinion, if you're not saying something, you're not shouting at the people, those who are trying to, shrink your spaces, if you're not, saying that you are wrong, it means that you are surrendering your rights fully and gradually. This is the reason that activism, and also saying that rights are important and we have a, right, these are legitimate claims which have been provided to us by the Constitution of India, and they must be there for all of us. Now, there are certain things that you have to keep in mind. If you go through the all the articles of the charter, or all the articles of the UDHR, that is Universal Declaration of Human Rights, before that you have to remember that this was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 10 December. But before one day, a very important legally binding treaty was adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations, and that was Convention Against Genocide. It was adopted on 9 December 1948, before 10 December, on 9 December 1948. And this is a legally binding treaty. Fortunately, and India is also, and I'm proud to say that India is a party, our country is a party to this particular convention. If you go through the provisions of those, that particular convention, that is, I'm talking about Genocide Convention, there should be a national legislation as well. That it must correspond in the national law. So in our own country, according to that particular international obligation of India, there should be a national legislation as well against genocide. Unfortunately, we don't have. Neither we have been demanding. So what is the need? Need is that, it is very good that our country, which is a constitutional democracy, has become a party to the Genocide Convention, which is a legally binding treaty, but at the same time, there must be a corresponding national law against genocide in this country as well. That is one of my submission that should be noted by the organizers. Number two, very important thing that, I'm coming back to the UDHR, that is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. you'll find there are two things. If you see the documents, there are two things. First of all, the principle of non-discrimination and equality has been emphasized almost in all the articles and the preamble of the, this particular UDHR. There should not be any kind of discrimination on the basis of religion, caste, creed, sex, place of birth, gender, etc. It has been emphasized. Number two, UDHR is merely a declaration. It is not binding, but it has assumed the status of customary law. And Mrs. Roosevelt has rightly said that it is Magna Carta of mankind, she has said. At the same time, you see the preamble itself proclaims, the preamble of the UDHR, that it is a common standard of achievement for all people and all nations. Common standard of achievement. So when we are talking about universal human rights, so right to life, right to freedom of expression, right to equality, right to a fair trial, all these, right to equality, all these are universally recognized rights under the UDHR. After that, United Nations has adopted more than 100 treaties, instruments, documents, conventions, covenant, or declarations on the human rights, various dimensions of human rights. For example, rights of minorities, rights of children, rights of indigenous people, rights of women, rights of old men, all kinds of rights. So this is there. Dr. Ahmed Junaid has rightly pointed out that whenever we try to trace the journey of human rights, we start from Magna Carta, and then we come to Glorious Revolution, then to French Revolution, then to Marxist revolutions and all. And we say that, this is what we call Western paradigm of human rights, under which we try to understand everything. But you look, there is a very, very important development, and that is happening all, that is a debate between cultural relativism and universalism. Whether all rights are universal, number one question, or there are certain rights, they must be understood, implemented in the context of the culture of a particular country. Rights are culture specific or not. It is, there are countries, the non-Western countries, they have been right from the very beginning pointing out, and especially developing countries like India, they have been pointing out that this universal declaration of human rights, or the rights that are claimed as universal, basically they are Western or Eurocentric approach to human rights. And that is why you will find that there is no balance between rights and duties. When there is no, and we have to strike a balance between rights and duties. So the right-centric approach to human rights will not yield any result. Why? Because first of all, you have to see whether the people are willing to accept those paradigms, people are willing to accept those, custom traditions. If they are in conflict with those rights, ultimately there will be a problem. And I'll just give you quickly an example, and after that I'll move forward, which is very important for this kind of organization when we are organizing. You might be hearing about, rights of minorities like linguistic minorities, religious minorities, racial minorities, or the, minorities based on gender. Now there is a new minority that has emerged, which has been, recognized at the international level, that is LGBTQ. The rights, it is called sexual minorities. People with different kind of inclination. So there are many countries in the world, they have legitimized, legalized, or decriminalized. All these terms are important. Some countries have decriminalized, some countries have legalized, some countries have legitimized what is called gay marriages, lesbian marriages, live-in relations. Without marriage, men and women can live together, and if the children are there, they are to be acceptable to society. Now, these rights, if you say these rights are universal, it is going to create problems for many societies like India, like many Muslim countries. They will not be willing to accept it. And that is why they will say that the rights are culture specific, and this is the reason that we cannot be pressurized, or we are not ready to accept any kind of pressure on us when you are saying that the lesbian marriages or the gay marriages should be legalized or legitimized, because it is in direct conflict with our civilizational, cultural, or social values. So this is the reason that they will contest the claim of the people, those who are saying that all rights are universal. According to them, yes, there are many, many rights. For example, right to life, right to freedom of expression, right to equality, right to have a fair trial. All these are what we call universal rights. But there are many, many human rights. They are culture specific, and that is why they should be implemented keeping in view the culture of a particular country. This aspect you have to understand. So that's why the paradigm of human rights that we have before us, that is from Magna Carta to the French Declaration of Rights, this particular rights and other rights, they have been developed in the Eurocentric paradigm. They have been challenged, contested by many developing and underdeveloped countries, the African countries, the Asian countries, Latin American countries, that you have to understand. Now, you see, it is also said that rights basically human rights are also understood in the context of democracy. And what is the understanding of superficial understanding of democracy? That democracy is where elections are held and the people are elected on the basis of elections. So if the elections are held and the people are elected on the basis of elections, that is a democracy, when the people have voting right. But this is just a very superficial understanding of democracy. This democracy is nothing but electoral democracy, because certain qualitative parameters must be developed to understand what democracy is. Democracy means accountable government. Democracy means a government which is taking care of all sections of people in a particular society. And here we are also reminded of a note of caution issued by famous political thinker John Stuart Mill, when he said that in a democracy there is always a danger of tyranny of majority. When democracies are turned into majoritarian democracies, they are basically tyranny of majority, a trend that you are witnessing all over the world these days. Rightist political parties emerging, claiming, they are doing the politics of anxiety, creating fear against the minorities, hatred against the minorities all over the world. And because of that, what is happening? That minorities are being targeted, they are being lynched, they are being burnt alive, they are being killed in fake encounters and all. So when you say that democracy and human rights go together, then the qualitative measurement of democracy, the qualitative analysis of democracy is important. Every electoral democracy cannot claim to be a true democracy. There are many, many false democracies. False democracies are those democracies who are not taking care of every section of the people. And if the people, those who are by sheer number, if they are less in number, by the fact that they are non-dominant, the fact that they are not having proper representation in the legislative and executive bodies, and because of that they can be targeted, then you can say that this is a flagrant violation of human rights recognized internationally. Another important aspect that you'll find in the international perspective also, you have to understand that there are major powers of the world, privileged powers of the world. Those privileged, for example, one of the example is 5 big bosses sitting in the United Nations Security Council with veto power. And, they can exercise veto against the collective wisdom of the humanity. One nation is saying no, it means no in the UN Security Council. And if all the nations of the world, all the members, 193 members of the United Nations, they say yes to one thing, and one big boss sitting in the UN Security Council with veto power says no, it means no. So, it is one of the examples. These big bosses are trying to impose wars on the nations that are independent and sovereign. And there are many, many pretexts, sometimes in the name of violation of human rights, sometimes in the name of terrorism or counter-terrorism, sometimes in the name of WMD, weapons of mass destruction. For example, war was imposed on Iraq. It is not only this, war was imposed on Afghanistan, Iraq, and then it is not only war, But you see, war is the worst violation of human rights, because during war, all rights are suspended. You don't have any rights. People are killed. Women are made widow. Children are made orphan. And how many people have died in these wars? Where are the figures? Where are the numbers? Number two, it is not only war. What about the sanctions that are being imposed by the major powers of the world? The sanctions being imposed upon the countries, and that is nothing but economic terrorism. For example, there is a sanction against Iran today, and what is the value of currency of Iran today? $1 American is equal to more than 50,000 Iranian currency. That is there because of the sanction. You can imagine the situation over there. Why? Because there is already a pretext of WMD that Iran is developing nuclear bomb. First of all, let me clear my position. I am against nuclear bomb, whether it is possessed by America, whether it is possessed by Russia, or whether it is possessed by any country, including my own country. I am, against a nuclear bomb because it is a weapon of mass destruction. Chemical, biological, and nuclear bombs are threat to international community, to peace and harmony, and all. But you see, these countries who are mounting pressure on Iran, they are the worst proliferators. So what happened that the sinners tried to teach the virtues of chastity. 93% of the total nuclear warheads are possessed by America and Russia. They together account for 93% of nuclear bombs in the world. Our own country doesn't possess more than 120 bombs. If they are saying that India or other countries, Iran or other countries, they should not have nuclear bomb, and if this kind of sanction is being imposed, you can say that this is nothing but a policy of nuclear imperialism. And again, you see, the context is very important. If Iran possesses nuclear bomb, then IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, should be given power to visit Iran and see whether they are having nuclear bomb or not. Libya cannot possess, Iran cannot possess, Iraq cannot possess. Chemical weapons of Bashar al-Assad will be a threat. What about the nuclear program of a particular country in that particular region, which is a nuclear power? A dreaded nuclear power in that particular region is the only country. But that particular country, when it is violating the rights of the Palestinians, and that is posing threat to all the nations in that particular region, that particular country will not face any kind of sanction. So why this kind of nuclear apartheid being practiced? That is, of course, violation of rights of the people, sovereign nations. So one particular country, which is a pampered nation, which is a favored nation, can have nuclear bomb in the Middle East, and other countries, they will face sanction. Iraq has been destroyed. Iran is being destroyed through sanctions. So, this is called economic terrorism. This dimension also you should keep in mind. And lastly, I am coming in the international perspective to one point, and that is the issue of international terrorism and violence, and then human rights. Terrorism in all its forms and manifestation is condemnable. I am saying in all its forms and manifestation is condemnable. Terrorism is terrorism whether it is practiced or perpetrated by a person with beard and turban, or by a person having, tilak on his forehead, a person who is wearing the uniform of the army or the police of a state, or a person who is putting cross in his neck. Terrorism is terrorism. It should not be, there should not be an actor-centric definition to terrorism. The act itself is condemnable. If violence is used against innocent people, that is terrorism, whether it is, perpetrated by anybody, whether they are in uniform or they are without uniform, whether they are Hindu, Muslim, Christian, anybody, that is terrorism. While doing my research on terrorism, I was going through literature and I found a fact, and the fact is that there are two kinds of terrorism that we should remember. One is what we call non-state terrorism. and the another is a state terrorism. Remember, you should never be guided by this kind of definition that terrorism is a one. Terrorism is to be always classified into two, and that is state terrorism and non-state terrorism. In the non-state terrorism, in 100 years, according to Bessoni, who is a very important scholar in terrorism and human rights, he found that in 100 years, in the terrorist-related violence, 1 lakh people were killed from 1901 to 2000 in the 20th century. How many people were killed? 1 lakh people were killed. Whereas in the state terrorism, you will find that 70 million, it means 7 crore people were killed in 100 years from 1901 to 2000 in the state terrorism, which is more dangerous, of course, the state terrorism. But if you go through the literature on terrorism, you will find that it is overwhelmingly or disproportionately focusing on non-state terrorism, which is responsible for killing 1 lakh people, and it is ignoring the state terrorism, which is responsible for killing 7 crore people across the globe. Therefore, while analyzing the acts of terrorism, whether by state or by non-state actor, that is condemnable, and it is worst form of violation of human rights. But these perspectives are also important. Now we are coming to our own country. I am proud citizen of a country which claims to be the largest democracy of the world. And I'm also proud of this fact that we belong to the largest democracy of the world. But this much is not enough. Where is the qualitative analysis of our democracy? Can we say that our democracy is a true democracy where there is nothing like a stifling of the voices of dissent? In recent years, you will find there are problems. Marginalization and social exclusion that we are witnessing. Marginalization of Dalits, social exclusion of the vulnerable sections like Adivasis, like tribals, like minorities. Attacks on Muslims and Christians, denomination, mosque, all under threat. Draconian laws, black laws are being made. For example, you must have seen the Citizenship Amendment Act, which is against the secular values, against the constitutional morality, against the constitutional values of our own country. Why, it is against, as is my understanding, because you see, our country is a secular democratic republic. And the inherent principle that have been emphasized in the constitution is principle of non-discrimination. At the same time, a special legislation should be there for the vulnerable sections, as we have reservation for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and of course OBCs. And of course, now we have reservation in the local bodies for the women as well. And this is very, very important. But at the same time, now this law has been made under which what is to be done? That there is only one community that has been singled out, and that community is Muslim community, which, after some time, what will, the citizenship has been reduced to the status of a piece of paper. You must possess a particular kind of paper. So this exercise that is going on in Assam, where the detention camps are there, and detention camps become concentration camps for many people, and that's why the reports of suicides and all come from there. We have to understand that this goes against the principle of our democracy. It goes against the spirit of the Constitution of India. So, friends, we must remember that this kind of laws, they are against the Constitution, and that is why vulnerable sections like Muslims, they must reclaim their constitutional rights. They must reclaim. We are proud citizens of this country. We have given our significant contribution to the development of this country, and that is why we must claim and reclaim our rights. I think the time is up now. Dr. Ahmed Junaid, should I wind up? You were raising hand, so I thought that I have to wind up now. Okay.
Sir, you can continue, sir.
Anyways, no, I will try to wind up very soon. There is another
till 8:15 you can continue. Till 8:15 you can continue, sir.
8:15, okay. So, friends, you see one more thing. There is also what we are witnessing today, the hate speeches. Hate has become an industry. And these hate speeches are basically the TV channels, for example, they are there. What kind of term they are using? Corona jihad, love jihad, these kind of terms. Derogatory, pejorative, provocative. And I am very sorry that even our judiciary is accepting this kind of terms. The people, those who are using this kind of term, they should be reprimanded that you cannot bring jihad into it. But this kind of terms are being accepted. For example, you might have seen that car sevaks, the perpetrators of violence on 6th December 1992 are still considered as car sevaks. Those who were responsible for the demolition of a mosque. This kind of terminologies are also important. So hate speeches that you are seeing in our country, there are journalists from a particular political party who are sitting in the newsroom, but they belong to a particular political party or shakhas. And what do? By sitting in those, newsrooms, creating hate, demonizing a particular community, creating atmosphere under which they will be lynched, and lynching is taking place. So I think for every act of lynching, for every act of burning alive of a person like a fragile, the people are basically provoked by the media, whether it is social media or whether it is the TV channels or the various print media. They are trying to create a kind of atmosphere under which minorities will be considered as outsiders, as a threat to Indian democracy, as a threat to the nation. And this is a very, very dangerous trend which must be challenged and which must be countered. I'm very happy that many are non-Muslim brothers, Hindu, Sikh, Christian, they all are coming together and they are saying this is something that should not be tolerated in this country. There are pronouncements by the judiciary as well. There is Press Council of India that is also issuing, the note of caution. So that is a good trend, but at the same time, if you're not claiming your rights, remember your rights will vanish, it will disappear. So claiming and reclaiming rights must be a continuous process. Lastly, what I want to say, we must, it is not only problems that are important. There are national institutions in our country. For example, we have, National Human Rights Commission, we have National Commission for Minorities, we have National Commission for Women, we have National Commission for Scheduled Castes, Scheduled Tribes, National Commission for Minorities, Educational Institutions and all. These bodies are important. But these bodies will become effective only when we are going to make them to work effectively. I'm giving you one example. I wrote a letter to National Commission for Minorities addressing the chairman that there is a media report that there was a person whose name was Salman from Saharanpur who went to Haryana and he wanted to seek a job. 786 the number that was inscribed on his right hand, and ultimately his right hand was chopped off. It was amputed, and then FIR was lodged against that particular person of sodomy and all. I was knowing that he will be harassed, so I wrote to the National Commission for Minorities that this is a report, and I attached the report. The National Commission for Minorities directed the DGP of Haryana that within 21 days they have to submit a report on this particular issue. And the letter was also given to me, and it was on the basis of my letter. A humble citizen of this country who is, teaching in a university is writing. What I want to emphasize is that these national institutions are very, very important. National Human Rights Commission, National Commission on Minorities, Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe. So whenever any kind of act of atrocity is there, you can write letters to the chairman of these commissions. There are already complaint cells that are there, in National Human Rights Commission, National Commission for Minorities and all. You should write, and I am very much sure, and there will be some kind of action. For example, there was, police violence on the MU campus, and you'll find National Human Rights Commission gave a report against police. and said that atrocities were committed against students on EMU campus on 15 December. Why people approached the National Human Rights Commission. So these bodies are important and they intervene, but you have to report them. Most of the time, if you are thinking that they will act on suo motu, it is not going to happen, because a lot of cases are pending. So that's why we have to believe our own institution, we have to believe our own constitution, and of course our democracy is, you cannot say that it is a true democracy in the true sense of the term, but of course citizens are responsible for it. When we are claiming and reclaiming our spaces, democratic spaces, and trying to force the government to recognize the rights of the people from all sections of the people, I think our democracy will of course be a wonderful democracy. I have all kind of hopes, I have all kind of optimism, and remember, in human rights, Iqbal ने बहुत अच्छी बात कही थी, अल्लामा इकबाल rightly said, कि ये खामोशी कहाँ तक लज्जत परवाज पैदा कर, जमीन पे तू हो और तेरी सदा हो आसमानों में. ये खामोशी, silence, it is rightly said that silence speaks louder, but if you are keeping mum, not reacting, not speaking anything within the paradigm of constitution, if you are not raising your voice against atrocity, against violation of human rights, it means your human rights will be taken away by the states. I have already given you the data. Thank you very much, friends, for giving me this opportunity. I am thankful to you. And of course, I hope that this kind of program will be organized on regular basis, sensitizing people about the rights and about their violation is very, very important. Thank you.
Junaid sir, sir, Muhibbullah sir, some of the questions are there in chat box, and so Junaid sir will coordinate and ask you, sir.
Okay, sure. It is over from my side. If there are questions, I am ready to take up. Dr. Ahmed Junaid.
Sir, Dr. Junaid sir.
Yeah.
Some networking issues, sir, Dr. Junaid sir. Just a second, sir.
No problem. No, if other speakers are there, Sharif Saab, if other speakers are there, you can invite them and we can take up, question after one more speaker has spoken. If there is any technical problem.
Sir, Dr. Junaid sir coordinated all the questions about that. One second, he some networking issues. He told me that he will come. Just...
Yeah.
Junaid sir. Dr. Junaid sir. Junaid sir, please.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Hello.
You are audible.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Junaid Sahab, you are audible.
Yes, sir. Sir, could you please give us? I mean, really sorry about the technical, issues. Sir, could you please, give us some light on the research you have done, the doctoral dissertation you have done? Actually, most of the time people are doing like theoretical stuff with little practical application, but your research seems like having a kind of like lot of potential, which is rights of minorities in India, and this and the formation of minority commission. This is what appears as your research. Sir, could you please give us more light on your research, and based on that some more practical solutions to face the present crisis we are facing?
Yeah. Basically, you see that research that I have done is on rights of minorities, especially religious minorities. You all know that the National Commission for Minorities is dealing with the religious minorities only, notified religious minorities. The most important problem that I was dealing at that time while doing my research was on, what is the perception or what is the approach to define minority in India? You'll find that the United Nations has already done. This is a quite problematic issue, how to define minority. So the the United Nations has defined minorities. Kepotorki's definition is very, very important. And he has taken into account four important things. Number one, numerically, a group should be inferior. Number one, group should be numerically inferior. Number two, it should be in a non-dominant position. It should be a non-dominant position. Number two, it must have a distinct identity, whether it is linguistic, religious, or whatever. And fourth is that it must cherish those identity and it should want to maintain that particular identity. It means, for example, as a Muslim, if you want to maintain your own identity, as a Hindu, if as a Sikh or Christian, you want to maintain your own identity, or that is, it means that you are a minority according to that definition. So it is not only number, it is not only arithmetic that is important. A particular community must be in a non-dominant position. It must be numerically inferior. It must cherish a distinct identity. It must have identity. In India, you will find a very commonsensical arithmetical approach has been adopted by the Supreme Court of India to define minority, that numerically inferior group at the state level. A state will be unit. For example, Kerala, for example, UP, for example, Bihar, that will be a unit. So numerically inferior group at the state level will be recognized as a minority, whether it is a dominant position or non-dominant position. So this is one problematic issue, that many other factors, they have not been taken into account. Number one. Number two, you will find that institutional mechanism was missing in this country. And I need a lot of time on discussing things basically. So I'll try to avoid right now the detail. The most important thing is that in my research, I found that in the Constituent Assembly of India, the debate on the rights of the inclusion of rights of minorities started from giving reservation to them in the executive bodies, in the legislative bodies, and also in public employment. Minorities should be given reservation in legislative bodies, executive bodies, and public employment. But later on, under the shadow of partition, all these rights were taken away, and the rights that were proposed. And finally, what was handed out to the minorities was cultural and educational rights of minorities, that is there under Article 29 and 30 of the Constitution. And this article is also being diluted because a kind of conflict has been created between Article 29 and 30, and that is why the minority character of Aligarh Muslim University, minority character of Jamia Millia Islamia, they are already in danger. The government has already given an affidavit in the court that these are not minority institutions. So there are many issues when you are talking about your PhD. There are many issues that can highlight, but the third important was the minority commission, where it has intervened and what kind of achievement it has made, and where is it, where are its failures. All this I have pointed out in my research.
So, I mean, as far as the question of concern, what would be the pragmatic step that Muslim organizations and Muslim intellectual groups should take when it comes to facing the challenges we are facing now, especially within the framework of constitution?
Great. All the solutions we have to seek is always within the framework of the Constitution, that you have also emphasized, and I should also emphasize that every solution is to be found in the under the framework of the Constitution of India. But if the vulnerable groups, the groups that are at the receiving end, if they try to fight their case in isolation from other vulnerable groups, जिसको कहते हैं unity of the co-sufferers, unity of the co-sufferers, the sufferers of the system. For example, Dalits, for example, tribals, for example, Adivasis, for example, OBCs, for example, other minorities. All these groups who are being targeted, who are at the receiving end, who are facing, some kind of existential threat, they all should come together. So that's why the unity of the co-sufferers is a very pragmatic kind of approach. If you are trying to, fight this case of violation of the rights of minorities, especially physical violence that is taking place only as an issue against minorities, against Muslims, it is not going to work, because that will be something very different problem. So ultimately, what is to be done, that the unity of the co-sufferers, all the people, those who are the victims of the system, they must come together and they should present their case.
Some people are now suggesting identity political movements, especially in the context of Bihar election. Many are suggesting the identity based political movement as a pragmatic way to address this sort of gross human right violations. Sir, what is your response and
Dr.
thought on that?
This is something I think you are also going to land into controversy when you are asking, but I'm not. I teach political science, and it is rightly said that wherever you are, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. So let me make it clear that on this particular issue, still I have been thinking that what should be there, that identity-based political movement. What is the future? We have two models. One model is Kerala model, where Muslim League is there, and that model is something that tells you the success story. After the freedom struggle, Muslim League continued in Kerala, and there is no time when legislature of Kerala was not having MLAs from the Muslim League. And this many things that need not to be explained, that what are the achievements of Muslim League. So that is one model which has inspired many people from the Muslim community to start political parties. And in UP alone, there are 17 Muslim political parties, you can understand. Of course, not very significant, but 17 political outfits are there in UP. There is a second model, and that is the model of Assam. In Assam, there are 30% Muslims. In Kerala, that percentage of Muslims is not there. I think it is 23-24%. But you see, in Assam, it is 30%. So after Jammu and Kashmir, which is no more a state, Assam is having the highest number of Muslims so far as percentage is concerned. There you will find a political party was formed, and that political party could not address the problems of Muslims over there. So that is a model, I will say it is not so successful model. There are people who are saying that rise of particular force over there, a political force with majoritarian ideology, is because of this particular movement in Assam. So these two models you have to keep in mind. Of course, Bihar elections are there before you, and then there is going to be an election in West Bengal, and after that UP, the two significant states, the two very crucial. The elections are going to be crucial. This is a very different issue that we can deliberate upon sometime. Some other issues are also going to be taken up. So I will say that the two models are there. Now you have to choose. A model which is highly successful, and a model which does not have that kind of success. What is to be done, keeping in view the experiences in Assam, whether it should be replicated in West Bengal or not?
Is it being part of the secular mainstream is always the solution to protect human rights of minority communities.
I usually say, and that I will try to speak in Urdu.
Yeah.
You can understand क्यों मैं हमेशा ये कहता हूँ कि सेकुलरिज्म माइनॉरिटीज की सिर्फ जरूरत ही नहीं है बल्कि मजबूरी भी, अकलियतों की मजबूरी भी। और आप ये याद रखिए कि अगर माइनॉरिटीज कम्युनलिज्म की तरफ जाएंगी तो वो कोई बहुत बड़ा मामला नहीं कर पाएंगे, लेकिन अगर मेजॉरिटी कम्युनलिज्म की तरफ जाती है तो दैट मेजॉरिटी विल इट विल गिव बर्थ टू व्हाट इज कॉल्ड कम्युनल फासिज्म। कम्युनलिज्म विल एंटर इनटू द फेज ऑफ फासिज्म। So that's why minorities should be very much conscious. Identity politics, I will say that you should not surrender your identity. Identity is very important. मैं उन लोगों के बिल्कुल एग्री नहीं करता जो लोग कहते हैं कि आइडेंटिटी पॉलिटिक्स को ज्यादा एम्फेसाइज नहीं करना चाहिए, इसलिए अगर आप ज्यादा एम्फेसाइज नहीं करेंगे तो आपका जिसे कहते हैं तहलील हो जाएंगे आप, इंजमाम हो जाएगा आपका। जुनैद साहब, एम आई राइट? अगर मैं उर्दू कोई परेशानी तो नहीं है?
No problem. Our audience can
जानबूझ
relate.
करके मैं ये बात कह रहा हूँ आपसे कि इंजमाम का खतरा रहता है, तहलील होने का खतरा रहता है। तो इसलिए जिसे आपकी शनाख्त जिसे कहते हैं, वो शनाख्त चाहे मजहबी हो, वो शनाख्त चाहे लिसानी हो, वो शनाख्त चाहे सकाफती और तहजीबी हो, उन शनाख्त को कायम रखना जरूरी है, अदरवाइज आप तो जम हो जाएंगे। यानी जिसे कहते हैं मेल्टिंग पॉट मॉडल कैन नॉट बी एक्सेप्टेबल टू अस। We don't want melting pot model. We want, the bouquet model. We want what is called the mosaic model. And that's why, when the efforts are going on for homogenization, we must be very much conscious of our own identity, which should be cherished and which must be maintained.
Great, sir. I mean, at the end, you were telling that the kind of the message you have sent to the Human Rights Commission, and the action it could bring. So, I mean, it was really inspiring for me to hear. Maybe this would be true for many others also. Sir, what do you think? What would be the kind of the steps organization like SSF should take to do such pragmatic action, which would give better results with limited efforts?
Yeah, I will say that the two things that I have been always witnessing, there are problems, जिनको कहते हैं बेदार कौमें जो होती हैं वो अपने जख्मों को भी ताज़ा रखती हैं। तो बेदार कौमें जो गलबा एक्सेप्ट नहीं करती, तो आपके लिए ये बहुत जरूरी है कि आप डॉक्यूमेंट करें तमाम चीजों को। डॉक्यूमेंटेशन ऑफ वायलेंस अगेंस्ट माइनॉरिटीज फॉर एग्जांपल, दैट इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। वो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन की कमी होती है जो इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे किया जा सकता है। और दूसरी तरफ as a citizen of this country, proud citizen of this country, you have every right to approach the various bodies that have been created by our own state, and that is National Human Rights Commission, National Commission for Minorities। इस तरह की बॉडीज को आप लिखिए, आई एम वेरी मच श्योर, आप लिख के देखिए, इनका इंटरवेंशन होता है और बहुत पॉजिटिव इंटरवेंशन होता है। ये मैं अपने पर्सनल तजर्बे की बुनियाद पे बता रहा हूँ। लोग नेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स कमीशन या नेशनल कमीशन फॉर माइनॉरिटीज वगैरह क्रिटिसाइज करते हैं, क्रिटिकल अप्रोच होना चाहिए। बहुत सारे एक्ट ऐसे होते हैं जिससे आप डिसएग्री करेंगे और आपको डिसअपॉइंटमेंट होगा, लेकिन बहुत सारी चीजें ऐसी होती हैं कि दैट विल एनकरेज यू, दैट मोटिवेट यू फॉर ह्यूमन राइट्स एक्टिविज्म। यू मस्ट अप्रोच। फॉर एग्जांपल, अगर किसी दलित की लिंचिंग होती है और हमने न्यूज़पेपर की कटिंग के साथ, अगर वो नेशनल मीडिया नहीं दिखाना चाह रहा, जो कॉर्पोरेट मीडिया है, देयर इज ऑलरेडी अ कॉर्पोरेटाइजेशन ऑफ मीडिया, कॉर्पोरेटाइजेशन ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी इन आवर कंट्री, तो हम उसे अगर नेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स कमीशन या नेशनल कमीशन फॉर शेड्यूल कास्ट को भेज देते हैं, तो ultimately you'll find some kind of action. At the same time, you can send it to a press also that this intervention and this reply has come from the commission. तो उससे क्या होता है कि it becomes a public issue. तो ultimately informed citizen जो होते हैं वही इंटरवीन भी कर पाते हैं। तो ये बहुत जरूरी है। इसके लिए डॉक्यूमेंटेशन नंबर 1, डॉक्यूमेंटेशन, उसमें कोई एग्जेजरेशन नहीं होना चाहिए। देखिए, डॉक्यूमेंटेशन को उसमें सबसे पहली बात, झूठी बातें उसमें नहीं होनी चाहिए, जो बात सच है वही होनी चाहिए, उसमें कोई एग्जेजरेशन नहीं होना चाहिए, और इट मस्ट बी ऑथेंटिक। तो इस टाइप के इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे एज अ सिटीजन ऑफ दिस कंट्री वी कैन डू।
As an organization, something I think SSF was focusing in the last few years is the legal empowerment of Muslim community in different parts, especially like in Assam. They were putting a great effort, especially in Assam. Then in Asifa's case came, SSF was putting kind of like great initiatives in that direction. We will be like really grateful to hear from you on some steps we can take, especially when it comes to providing legal aid to especially minority communities?
ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इशू है। मैं इस पे आपको बहुत मुबारकबाद देता हूँ कि आपने ये सवाल किया। उसकी वजह ये कि द पीपल इन डिस्ट्रेस, दे डोंट नो व्हाट आर देयर राइट्स, वेयर टू अप्रोच, वेयर टू गो व्हेन दे आर अंडर डिस्ट्रेस। जिसको 2 वक्त का खाना नहीं है, उससे आप कहिए कि एक अच्छा लॉयर करके वो जाके अपने वो राइट जो उसके जेन्युइन राइट्स उसको डिफेंड करें, वो नहीं कर सकता। हमारे यहाँ ऑलरेडी एक फ्री लीगल एड का प्रोविजन है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ इंडिया के थ्रू, जो हम लोगों को मिला हुआ है। आप देखेंगे जुडिशरी का बहुत अच्छा इनोवेशन भी है इसमें। बट जो फ्री लीगल एड होता है वो किस तरह का होता है, उससे आप अच्छी तरह वाकिफ है कि किस तरह के लॉयर होते हैं और क्या फॉर्मेलिटीज होती है। तो बहुत ही इफेक्टिव इंटरवेंशन बहुत जरूरी है। और आपको याद रखिए कि एक पर्टिकुलर आदमी होगा, उसके लिए हरीश तालवे खड़े हो जाएंगे 25 लाख रुपए लेकर के या जितने भी रुपये लेकर के एक हियरिंग के लिए, और अल्टीमेटली उस आदमी की लिबर्टी फॉरन प्रोटेक्ट हो जाएगी, पर्सनल लिबर्टी फॉरन प्रोटेक्ट हो जाएगी। लेकिन आपको तो टाइपिंग से लेकर के, यानी जो केस की टाइपिंग के जो चार्जेस होते हैं, वहां से स्ट्रगल शुरू हो जाता है उस आदमी का टू अप्रोच अ गुड लॉयर। कभी कभी आप उस आदमी के पास पहुंच जाते हैं जो आपको मिसगाइड करना चाह रहा है, जो चाहता है कि आपके राइट्स को इम्प्लीमेंट ना किया जाए। तो अल्टीमेटली ऐसी हालत में आइडेंटिफाई करना थ्रू नेटवर्क अच्छे लोगों को, सेकुलर ओरिएंटेशन के, जस्टिस ओरिएंटेड लोगों को, और उनके थ्रू स्ट्रगल करना डिफरेंट अदर ह्यूमन राइट्स ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के साथ मिलकर के। मिसाल के तौर पे तीस्ता सतलवाद, आई नो हाउ शी इज वर्किंग इन आसाम फॉर एग्जांपल, for all the communities in Assam, those who are living in the detention camps or those who are facing these issue of citizenship and all, NRC etc. तो इन तरह के लोगों के साथ कोऑर्डिनेशन करके जो हमारे नेशनल लेवल पे काम कर रहे हैं, हम लोग बड़ा काम कर सकते हैं। और ये बहुत जरूरी है। लीगल एड अगर आप नहीं प्रोवाइड करेंगे तो जिसे कहते हैं ना, क्रिमिनलाइजेशन ऑफ इनोसेंट पीपल हो जाएगा, क्रिमिनलाइजेशन ऑफ आपके इंस्टीट्यूशंस हो जाएगा। तो ये बहुत जरूरी है कि इसके लिए काम किया जाए और बहुत इफेक्टिव काम किया जाए। आप ट्रेन करें। मिसाल के तौर पर आरटीआई एक्टिविस्ट के लिए वर्कशॉप आप क्यों नहीं करते? व्हाई डोंट वी हैव अ वर्कशॉप फॉर आरटीआई एक्टिविज्म, जो हमें राइट मिला हुआ है। हम 500 अगर आरटीआई वर्कर्स तैयार करते हैं जो आरटीआई एक्टिविस्ट हैं, हम 500 लोगों को जो लॉयर नहीं भी हैं और वो सिर्फ लीगल इश्यूज को जानते हैं, चीजों को सिर्फ लिख करके पेश कर सकते हैं, ऐसे लोगों को क्यों नहीं ट्रेन करते हैं जो दूसरे लोगों के इश्यूज को उठाएं। सिर्फ एक कैविएट हमेशा याद रखना है कि हमें सारी चीजें पीसफुल और डेमोक्रेटिक मीन्स के साथ करना है, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के दायरे में रह के करना है। विद इन दी पैराडाइम, विद इन दी लिमिट्स ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, वी हैव टू डू एवरीथिंग। यही सामने रखते हुए, यही हमारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को दूसरी तमाम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से मुमताज भी करती है कि हम एक पीसफुल, डेमोक्रेटिक और कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मीन्स अडॉप्ट करते हुए चीजों को हासिल करना चाहते हैं।
So thank you for, sir was like giving new ideas for, the agenda of, SSF specifically and Muslim organizations in general, more than what we generally focus upon. I think this is something very relevant given the fact that, hundreds or thousands of Muslims who are under trials for years and years without really knowing that, why they are put behind bars. Given this, things are put a kind of like very important agenda to our list. So to wind up, sir, what would be
अहमद
your
जुनैद साहब, विद दिस,
yeah
जहां आपने पॉइंट आउट किया, वहां से एक बहुत याद रखने की बात है
yeah
कि देयर शुड बी हम लोगों के साथ प्रॉब्लम क्या है, जो वल्नरेबल ग्रुप्स हैं वो रिएक्टिव ज्यादा होते हैं। यानी कोई प्रॉब्लम आपके लिए क्रिएट करता है, फिर आप रिएक्ट करते हैं। हम लोग एक्टिव नहीं होते, प्रोएक्टिव अप्रोच नहीं
yeah
होता। ये जो द पीपल, थाउजेंड्स ऑफ मुस्लिम, दोज हु आर लैंग्वेजिंग बिहाइंड द बार्स, इवन अगर सच्चर कमेटी की रिपोर्ट देखेंगे और बाकी जो दूसरी रिपोर्ट देखेंगे, 90% लोग जो है वल्नरेबल ग्रुप्स के ही हैं तमाम जेलों में। वो वल्नरेबल ग्रुप्स के हैं, नॉट ओनली मुस्लिम्स, बाकी अदर सेगमेंट
yeah
के।
Dalits,
तो
tribals, yeah
उसमें क्या होता है कि हमें एक चीज डिमांड करनी चाहिए, एंड दैट इज अ लॉ ऑफ कंपनसेशन शुड बी देयर। कंपनसेटरी जस्टिस इज मिसिंग इन आवर कंट्री। तो प्रोएक्टिव अप्रोच ही होना चाहिए कि व्हाई डोंट वी आस्क पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज टू इंक्लूड इन देयर एजेंडा, in their manifesto, the provision for compensatory justice. For example, if there is an innocent person who has been arrested, detained illegally, and after 25 years he released from jail with an innocent certificate, that is not enough. What about those 25 precious years that he has spent behind the bars without committing any crime?
yeah
This is gross injustice done to a particular citizen. So that is why there should be a law of compensatory justice in our country.
Great, sir. Sir, given that as you rightly mentioned throughout your lecture, often the democratic principles are hijacked by majoritarianism. There is a trend that Muslim youth are like falling into frustration, isn't it? And they're falling into pessimism. So as a political scientist, human rights activist, we would be like, I mean, the youth who would be listening this program would be grateful to hear from you on that aspect.
अहमद जुनैद साहब, एक चीज मैं आपको बताऊं कि मैं थियोलॉजिकल डिस्कोर्स में और आम तौर पे एंटर नहीं करता, क्योंकि वो मेरा डोमेन नहीं है। मैं पॉलिटिकल साइंस पढ़ाता हूं और मेरी उस तरह की ट्रेनिंग नहीं है। बट मैं ये अक्सर देखता हूं कि हमारे यहाँ वी ट्राई टू फाइंड डिवाइन सॉल्यूशन टू वर्ल्डली प्रॉब्लम, हेवनली सॉल्यूशन टू वर्ल्डली प्रॉब्लम। वर्ल्डली प्रॉब्लम्स के वर्ल्डली सॉल्यूशन होते हैं, वर्ल्डली एफर्ट्स होते हैं। मदद आती है ऊपर से यकीनन, लेकिन एफर्ट्स तो हमें करने पड़ते हैं। मैं ये देखता हूं कि जो हमारे यहाँ जो होता है कि तमाम चीजों के लिए कहते हैं कि हमारे आमाल खराब है, और आमाल वाला जो डिस्कोर्स होता है उसमें क्या होता है, मिसाल के तौर पे किसी पार्टिकुलर जगह पे बहुत ज्यादा कॉलोसल वायलेशन ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स बाय एक पार्टिकुलर कम्युनिटी को, और आपने कहा कि आपके आमाल खराब है, तो इसका मतलब आमाल खराब है और जालिम हुक्मरान को मसलत कर दिया जाता है, ये वाला डिस्कोर्स आता है। तो अल्टीमेटली यू आर नॉट साइडिंग विद द विक्टिम, रादर यू आर साइडिंग विद द कल्प्रिट। ये अप्रोच छोड़ना होगा। अमाल देखिए बिल्कुल बहुत अच्छी बात है कि हमें बहुत अच्छे होने चाहिए, लेकिन अमाल तो इंक्लूसिव यानी एक ऑल कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव कॉन्सेप्ट है ना। जस्टिस के लिए आपको स्ट्रगल करना भी आपके अच्छे अमाल में शामिल होता है। ऑनेस्टी के साथ कारोबार करना भी आपके अच्छे अमाल में शामिल होता है। उसमें सिर्फ रिचुअल्स नहीं होते हैं। तो जो हमारे यूथ को इस बात को याद रखना चाहिए कि देखिए, नाउमीदी तो आपका कोई रास्ता ही नहीं है। यानी नाउमीदी जो कुफ्र है ये कहा जाता है। तो अल्टीमेटली pessimism is something that should not be there at all. You know, we have to be very much optimistic. कौमों पे अगर आप देखेंगे तो बड़े बुरे दौर आते हैं, और कौमें अपनी हिकमत से और उसको बेहतर तरीके से जब अप्लाई करती हैं, तो आप चैलेंजेस को अपॉर्चुनिटीज में बदल सकते हैं। मिसाल के तौर पर मैं आपसे कहूँ, हमारे जितने यूथ हैं वो क्या इस बात का प्लेज ले सकते हैं, आपके सामने जो चैलेंजेस हैं, कि शादियों में जो 10 लाख रुपए या 20 लाख रुपए या 50 लाख रुपए तक लोग खर्च करते हैं, उसकी जगह पे हम 5,000 में अपनी शादी कर लेंगे, और जो पैसा हमारे गार्जियन ने देना चाहा था उसमें शादियों में हम पहले तो जहेज नहीं लेंगे, दूसरी बार जो शादी में खर्च करना चाहा था वो हम किसी मुस्लिम ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को दे देंगे जो काम कर रही है, या जो गरीबों के लिए हम खर्च कर देंगे। तीसरी एक अहम बात मैं अहमद जुनैद साहब इसमें हाईलाइट करना चाहूंगा कि देखिए, हमारे पास कोई मैकेनिज्म नहीं है। मदरसे और मस्जिद कहीं भी हम बना के खड़ी कर देते हैं, और आने वाले दिनों में उनकी तहफ़्फ़ुज़ की जिम्मेदारी आपके लिए इतनी मुश्किल हो जाती है, तहफ़्फ़ुज़ करना मुश्किल हो जाता है। उसकी वजह ये होती है कि मदारिस से फारिगीन हमारे बहुत सारे लोग, जब उनके पास कोई सोर्स ऑफ इनकम नहीं होता, तो किसी भी बुनियाद पे, मसलकी बुनियाद पे या किसी भी बुनियाद पे अननेसेसरी, जहाँ पे मस्जिद की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है, वहाँ पे ऑलरेडी मस्जिद एग्जिस्ट करती है। आप देखिएगा 500 मीटर के रेडियस में मैंने देखा है 7-7, 8-8 मस्जिदें, और एक ही मसलक की, ऐसा भी नहीं कि बहुत सारे मसालिक की। तो हमारे पास कोई ऐसा सेंट्रल मैकेनिज्म नहीं है कि मदारिस, एक मोहल्ला जो है एक यतीम खाने की कफालत नहीं कर सकता, वहां पे 3 यतीम खाने खुल जाते हैं और एक भी स्कूल नहीं होता। तो कुछ हमें इंट्रोस्पेक्शन करना पड़ेगा, और हमारे नौजवानों को इसमें सामने आना होगा और ये बोलना होगा आपको। सवाब जारिया, कुआं खुदवाना है, मस्जिद बनवाना है, ये जो कह दिया जाता है, तो कुआं आज के दौर में तो नहीं खुदवाना है ना। आज के दौर में तो आपको भाई पानी का इंतजाम करना है कि लोग प्यासे मर रहे हैं। तो अल्टीमेटली मस्जिदें बिल्कुल जरूरी हैं, और हमारी शनाख्त भी है, और हमारे लिए बहुत जरूरी भी है, इंटीग्रल पार्ट है हमारे मजहब का। लेकिन अल्टीमेटली उसकी जरूरत कितनी है, मदारिस की कितनी जरूरत है, मसाजिद की कितनी जरूरत है। फिर 5 मसाजिद से कोई टाइम टेबल नहीं होता, एक साथ 3 आवाजें अजान की टकरा रही होती। आप अजान का अगर एहतराम भी करना चाहें तो आपको हर नमाज के वक्त कम से कम आधे घंटे फुर्सत में बैठ जाना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि हर मस्जिद में थोड़ी थोड़ी देर बाद अजान हो रही है। मुअज्जिन का अपॉइंटमेंट करते वक्त आप इस बात को नहीं सोचते, जो हमारे यहाँ बुजुर्गों ने बताया कि खुशबू होना चाहिए मुअज्जिन। और एक बड़े इस्लामिक स्कॉलर को मैंने सुना इंग्लैंड में, उन्होंने कहा कि बाज औकात मुअज्जिन या इमाम जो अपॉइंट किए जाते हैं जिनके लिए शर्तें हैं, तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि मुअज्जिन बुलाने के लिए नहीं आवाज दे रहा बल्कि भगाने के लिए आवाज दे रहा है, ऐसी आवाज होती है। भाई अजान का एक हुनर होता है, मुझसे आप अजान दिलवा देंगे, मैं बहुत खराब दूंगा अजान। अजान का एक ऐसा हुनर होता है जो दिल में उतर जाती है, मेरा दिल में उतर जाती है। तो अल्टीमेटली इन सब चीज़ों को मुस्लिम ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को या जो मुस्लिम मुख्तलिफ जगहों को लीड कर रहे हैं उनको अपने जहन में रखना होगा, आपको इश्यूज को एड्रेस करना होगा। मल्लापुरम से एक बहुत अच्छी न्यूज़ आई थी जिसको अखबारों ने कैरी किया था कि वहाँ पे फैसला किया गया किसी इलाके में कि मस्जिद जो अजान होगी एक साथ सारी मसाजिद में अजान नहीं होगी बल्कि एक मस्जिद में अजान होगी। इस टाइप की कुछ न्यूज़ आई थी। मैं ये समझता हूँ कि अगर एक मस्जिद से माइक से अजान होती है और 5 मसाजिद से बगैर माइक की अजान होती है तो उसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। साउंड पॉल्यूशन इज अ प्रॉब्लम, और उसमें आप क्यों इंतजार कर रहे हैं कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट का एक जजमेंट आए जैसे ट्रिपल तलाक में आया फिर आप बंद करेंगे ये सब। तो अल्टीमेटली आपको अपने इश्यूज को खुद से एड्रेस करना होगा एक रेस्पॉन्सिबल माइनॉरिटी के तौर।
Thank you, sir, for putting very valuable insights. Okay, to summarize some of the major points Muhibullah sir was highlighting. The fact of the matter is that this lecture is being listened by thousands of the people across India, pan India. Well-educated Muslim youth pan across India are listening to it, from Kerala to Kashmir, across India, across the breadth and length of India. Many are listening to this, and in future also, you see, the records of this would be discussed and deliberated by many. I'm sure sir's valuable insights and thoughts would be converted into constructive activity, constructive in a constructive way. So some of the points sir highlighting was, we should focus on being proactive instead of just being reactive, which is always the trend. And sir was also pointing out about internal actions which we should take, other than just blaming upon many other factors. Okay. So, and thirdly, I mean, one valuable point, sir, insight, I mean, emphasized to us compensatory justice. I think in Indian context, this is something we should work for that. Okay, we should, I mean, through advocacy groups, we should try for that, and we should put this point quite loudly. Then fourthly, sir added one more thing to the agenda of Muslim organizations or minority organizations in general, that is about taking initiatives for providing legal aid and legal support, especially for the thousands who are suffering or languishing in in many jails across India. I hope all Muslim organizations, not just SSF, would take this as one of the primary thing in their agenda list. And especially in across, I mean, in the beginning of the lecture, sir was exposing the hypocrisy of the global powers, and how the majoritarianism is not going with democracy. This was a great eye opening factor. It was really challenging the existing discourses on human rights. Okay. Thank you for, sir, I mean, this eye
Thank you very
opening
much.
discussion. And we will have other guests in the upcoming sessions. We will listen to them, and we look forward to work with you and learn from you, sir, in the future.
Thank you
I
very
hope
much.
in
Jazakallah.
possible ways you would also contribute to this mission. I know within your limitations, and within your, I mean, definitely you are committed with a lot of responsibilities. We look forward for your guidance in the future, and together in our action for empowering a community which is struggling very much. Thank you very much. May Allah bless you and give
Thank you.
barakah in
Jazakallah.
all deeds of you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sharif Saab, should we wind up? I think Sharif Saab will be making the note.
Yeah. We can wind up, sir. Our two guests are some network issues facing. Our Farooq Naimi have some network issues, and Shamsuddin sir also.
I think they will join in the next session, na?
He will join next session, inshallah.
Yeah, after the break. Yeah.
So
After.
can I leave Ahmed
Of
Junaid
course.
sir?
Of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
sir. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah, in upcoming session, our Shamsuddin sir and Farooq Naim sir will join. Inshallah, now we can wind up this session.